Jewish books, music, film, and web. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. Louise Borden won the 2013 Sidney Taylor Book Award for her compelling prose poetry biography of Raoul Wallenberg, a righteous Gentile who saved many Jews during World War II. She spoke with me about how Wallenberg continues to inspire her. Here we are at the Association of Jewish Libraries Conference 2013 in Houston, Texas. And I'm here with Louise Borden, who is the gold medal winner for the Sidney Taylor Book Award for the older readers category for the book called His Name Was Raoul Wallenberg. I also want to mention that we have recognized Louise in the past for a book on the creators of Curious George.
The Journey That Saved Curious George.
The Journey That Saved Curious George. So tell us about Raoul Wallenberg.
Raoul Wallenberg is someone whom I was not familiar with until I was an adult. I first read a book about him in 1985, and from then on, he became my hero. He was a person who had an amazing moral compass and who went from his neutral, safe country of Sweden during World War II to the hell of Budapest to try and mount a rescue mission to save the remaining Jews who were left in the city. And he was very successful in galvanizing other neutral diplomats to help him in these efforts.
So, like your earlier book, this is nonfiction. It's free verse. It includes, I guess I would say, primary documents, original photographs. So talk about how all of these components come together.
Well, I think there are kind of three parts of my writing process. The first part is passion for the subject and the inspiration, and that's going to have to carry me over several years or many years until the project is completed. And then there's the research part, which involves immersing myself in the time period, in the subject, reading deeply. I might read 25, 50, 75 books, newspaper articles. I use the web. I also use personal interviews, and it can involve travels. So for this particular book, I did do a lot of traveling. I went to Stockholm 3 times. I went to Budapest several times. I went to New York City and did a lot of my writing of the book actually in a library at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. It took me several years to write the book. So during the writing, I'm not really working on other projects because I have to keep that voice. It's like trying to sing 2 songs. So my total focus was Raoul Wallenberg for many years. So I was fortunate enough to meet his family members. Really, the reading, the writing, and the research were kind of life-altering for me. I became much more aware of the battle for human rights today and just the importance of making his legacy known to young people around the world. I don't want kids to be bystanders. I want them to be upstanders.
I like that. Yeah. Upstanders.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, we have bullies in schools. We have big problems in the world. And I think young people are very inspired by Raoul's story. And, of course, I'm writing about the darkest time in human history. For many children in America right now, World War II is a distant time. It's a distant past and ancient history. And I just feel grateful that I can add to the conversation about these long ago times. By trying to make history accessible to kids, I use my own writing style that I've used in all of my books. I use broken lines. Some people aren't sure if it's a poem or if it's prose, and I don't really know what the proper name for it is, but I consider it's narrative nonfiction. I take the most important but also the most interesting details and put them in my text. And I think I have this secret language with kids that I know what's going to interest them and will draw them to the story. I never embellish. I don't use dialogue in my books. I make them as true as I can by checking my sources and using the primary documents. I want kids to see what I got to see in libraries in faraway places or letters or whatever.
How did you get interested in Raoul Wallenberg as a person originally?
Well, I was drawn to him because when I was a little kid, I would see photos of countries in Europe like Sweden and Hungary, places I'd never gone. And then when I read about his life, I wanted to shine a light on something good that happened in this terrible time. Because the Holocaust is just so unspeakable in so many ways. But to find someone who cared about others and went to help strangers in a foreign country, I thought was important. I also loved him as a person. He was an artist. I kind of dance around the edge of the art world with my illustrated picture books. So I love artists. I study the lives of artists. I'm very interested in art and architecture, and this was his field, architecture. He was a linguist. He spoke many languages. I just thought that was wonderful, too. The landscapes he moved in. He was a traveler. He was interested in people. And all of those traits in his personality drew me to his warmth.
You're describing his warmth, and I think as you read the book, you really do feel like you get to know him, which is a wonderful mark of a good biography. What was the most interesting thing or maybe surprising thing that you learned about him as you researched him?
I read his letters and dispatches, and in reading his letters home, he was an excellent writer, but his descriptions of landscape and people were just very interesting to me. I mean, he was very educated, but he also seemed to be at ease in whatever landscape he was in, whether he was in America in college or traveling and working in South Africa. When he went to Palestine, he lived in a boarding house and met Jewish refugees from Europe, and he befriended them. So he just really did seem like a citizen of the world. Knowing that we are all connected by our humanity, regardless of our faith, he seemed to have no prejudice for people who had different backgrounds and cultures, whether it was economic or faith. And this is just very inspiring to me. Also his courage. Would I have had that courage to stand up against the might and the brutal force that he had to stand up to? Would I have had the moral compass to constantly write memos of protest when Jewish children were being dragged out of orphanages, people were being dragged to the Danube and shot? Would I have had the courage to stand up against brutality and evil? I hope I would, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's back up, because not everyone listening necessarily knows what it is that Raoul Wallenberg did. They may have heard the name, but they might not be aware of his actual role. So go back and explain what it is that he is remembered for doing.
He was asked by the War Refugee Board of the American government and also the World Jewish Council and the neutral foreign office of Sweden to go to Budapest and try and organize some kind of rescue efforts on behalf of many Jewish families. So to do this, he had to move among people who had been placed in ghettos. He organized food supplies for these people, medical supplies. He gave them hope and tried to lift their morale from this terrible plight that they were in. He did not use a gun. He did not use violent means. He used his voice and his wits to sometimes trick or bribe German and Hungarian Nazi officials. And he used the power of his government, the Swedish flag, the neutrality of Sweden, to place these Jewish families who were now stateless under the protection of his government. His goal was to keep them safe and to keep them alive and survive this terrible siege of Budapest, where the Germans and the Russians were fighting, and it was in the dead of winter, that he could keep these families alive until the city was liberated.
How many people did he save?
It was not just Raoul alone who saved up to 100,000 people. It was many of the neutral diplomats working together, but statistics run from 100,000 people to 120,000 people who survived in Budapest because of the efforts of these brave, brave people.
As you say, it was a team effort, and you acknowledge many of those other people in your book. So what makes Raoul special? He's the title of the book.
He's the title of the book, and I think he led by example. I think all of these people were working very hard on their own and together. But for me, I chose him to write about. Each of these people could have their own book. because they all did wonderful things. But I think he had a connection to the American landscape. He was sent by our government. He came from a position of privilege. He did not need to be there, and he volunteered to go to Budapest. These other diplomats were working there in their own official capacities, but they were all great people of compassion.
So he was kind of a linchpin among all of these different people?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to tell?
I guess I would just like young readers, when they read his story, to think about their own lives in the 21st century, to think about how they want to grow up, the kind of person that they want to be. Will they help others, and will they stand up for the rights of others? That's what I want kids to think about. They may never encounter, and hopefully never will encounter, a situation like Raoul Wallenberg. But they will encounter prejudice and bias along the way, and cruelty, and I want them to have this inspiration inside them to carry into their futures.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Louise.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
There are so many ways to connect with the Book of Life. Fan us at facebook.com/Book of Life Podcast. Follow us at twitter.com/Book of Life Pod. Email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. You can also listen to the latest episode by phone at 916-313-3820. And of course, find links to everything at bookoflifepodcast.com. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band at freilachmakers.com. Thanks for listening and happy reading.